Water is essential for life, but it can also be the instrument of death. Drowning is one of the most terrifying ways to die. A slow suffocation as the lungs fill with liquid and the body fights desperately for air that will never come. What makes these deaths even more tragic is that they were entirely preventable. Simple safety measures, better judgment, or proper supervision could have saved these lives. These are 5 of the worst drowning deaths that could have been prevented, told with forensic precision using real names, real dates, and real locations. This is the brutal truth about when water becomes deadly. The locked pool gate. Zachary Archer, 4 years old, lived with his parents in a suburban neighborhood in Phoenix, Arizona. On June 14, 2010, at approximately 3:30 p.m., his mother, Jennifer Archer, was inside their home preparing dinner. Their backyard featured a swimming pool surrounded by a safety fence with a locked gate installed to prevent unsupervised access. At 3:35 p.m., Zachary wandered into the backyard. The gate, which should have been locked, had been left slightly ajar by a pool maintenance worker who had visited earlier that day. Zachary pushed it open and walked to the pool's edge. At 3:37 p.m., he leaned over to touch the water and lost his balance. He fell into the deep end, which was 8 feet deep. Zachary did not know how to swim. The moment he hit the water, panic set in. He thrashed his arms and legs trying to reach the surface, but his small body lacked the strength and coordination. Water entered his mouth as he gasped for air. The natural response to drowning is to inhale, and Zachary's lungs began to fill with water. This is called wet drowning. Within 30 seconds, he had inhaled enough water to trigger laryngospasm, a reflex where the vocal cords close to prevent more water from entering the lungs. But this also prevented air from entering. He was suffocating. His movements became weaker as oxygen deprivation set in. His brain, starved of oxygen, began to shut down. By minute 2, he had lost consciousness. His body sank to the bottom of the pool. At 3:52 p.m., 15 minutes after Zachary had gone outside, Jennifer Archer went to check on him. She saw the open gate and ran to the pool. She saw his small body at the bottom, motionless. She jumped in, pulled him out, and called 911 while performing CPR. Paramedics arrived at 4:01 p.m. and continued resuscitation efforts. Zachary was transported to Phoenix Children's Hospital, where he was pronounced dead at 4:47 p.m. The coroner's report listed cause of death as drowning due to unsupervised pool access. The pool maintenance company was later sued for negligence. The Riptide Rescue. Thomas Hendricks, 52 years old, was vacationing with his family at Pensacola Beach, Florida, on July 8, 2013. At 2:15 p.m., his 12-year-old daughter, Emma, was swimming in the ocean approximately 50 feet from shore. The beach had posted red flags indicating dangerous surf conditions and strong riptide currents, but many swimmers ignored the warnings. At 2:18 p.m., Emma began screaming for help. She had been caught in a riptide, a powerful current pulling her away from shore. Hendricks, without hesitation, ran into the water to save her. He was a strong swimmer, but he was unfamiliar with riptide rescue techniques. The correct response is to swim parallel to the shore to escape the current, then swim back to land. Instead, Hendricks swam directly toward his daughter, fighting against the current. By 2:20 p.m., he had reached Emma and grabbed her, but the riptide was pulling both of them further from shore. Hendricks tried to swim back, but the current was too strong. He was expending enormous energy fighting the water. His heart rate spiked to over 180 beats per minute. His muscles began to fatigue. At 2:23 p.m., Emma, in her panic, climbed onto her father's shoulders, pushing him underwater. This is a common occurrence in drowning rescues. The victim, desperate for air, uses the rescuer as a flotation device. Hendricks went under. He inhaled water. His lungs filled, and he began to drown. He pushed Emma off and surfaced, gasping and coughing, but he had inhaled enough water to impair his breathing. At 2:25 p.m., a lifeguard on a jet ski reached them. The lifeguard pulled Emma onto the rescue sled first, as she was closer to losing consciousness. Hendricks, now alone and exhausted, went under again. By the time the lifeguard returned at 2:28 p.m., Hendricks was unresponsive, floating face down in the water. He was pulled onto the jet ski and brought to shore. Lifeguards performed CPR for 12 minutes. Paramedics arrived and continued resuscitation efforts, but Hendricks could not be revived. He was pronounced dead at the scene at 2:47 p.m. The coroner's report listed cause of death as drowning due to riptide current. Emma survived. Hendricks' death was preventable If he had known proper riptide escape techniques or waited for lifeguard assistance, he would likely have survived. The frozen lake. Jacob Morrison, 16 years old, Kyle Chen, 15 years old, and Brandon Walsh, 17 years old, were friends from Sheboygan, Wisconsin. On January 19, 2011, they decided to walk across Lake Michigan's frozen surface to reach a small island approximately 200 yards from shore. The temperature was 18 degrees Fahrenheit, and the lake had been frozen for 3 weeks. However, recent warmer weather had weakened the ice in certain areas. At 4:30 p.m., the three boys began walking across the ice. For the first 100 yards, the ice was solid, approximately 6 inches thick. But as they approached the midpoint, they entered an area where the ice was only 2 inches thick, weakened by an underwater current. At 4:34 p.m., the ice beneath Jacob Morrison cracked. He fell through into the water below. The water temperature was 33 degrees Fahrenheit, just above freezing. The shock of the cold water caused an involuntary gasp reflex, and Morrison inhaled water immediately. This is called cold water shock, and it can cause drowning within seconds. Kyle Chen and Brandon Walsh tried to help. They crawled toward the hole on their stomachs to distribute their weight, but the ice continued to crack. At 4:35 p.m., Chen fell through. At 4:36 p.m., Walsh fell through. All three boys were now in the water, struggling to pull themselves back onto the ice, but the ice kept breaking under their weight. In water this cold, the body loses heat 25 times faster than in air. Within 2 minutes, all three boys were experiencing severe hypothermia. Their muscles stopped responding. Their movements became sluggish. Morrison went under first at 4:38 p.m. Chen followed at 4:39 p.m. Walsh, the strongest swimmer, managed to keep his head above water until 4:41 p.m. before he too sank beneath the surface. A witness on shore called 911 at 4:35 p.m. But rescue teams took 18 minutes to arrive with proper equipment. Divers recovered the bodies at 5:47 p.m., over an hour after the boys had fallen through the ice. All three were pronounced dead at the scene. The coroner's report listed cause of death as drowning and hypothermia due to cold water immersion. This tragedy was entirely preventable. The boys should never have attempted to cross ice that had not been tested for thickness and stability. The flash flood. Linda Carmichael, 38 years old, was driving home from work in Tucson, Arizona on August 3, 2014. At 6:15 p.m., a sudden monsoon storm dumped over 2 inches of rain in less than 30 minutes, causing flash flooding throughout the city. Carmichael was driving on a low-lying road when she encountered a flooded section. The water appeared to be only a few inches deep. At 6:18 p.m., she decided to drive through it. This is a common and often fatal mistake. The phrase, "turn around, don't drown," exists because many people underestimate the power of moving water. As Carmichael's car entered the flooded area, the water was actually 18 inches deep and moving at approximately 6 miles per hour. The current pushed against her vehicle. Within seconds, her car began to float. Just 12 inches of moving water can carry away most vehicles. At 6:19 p.m., the current swept her car off the road and into a drainage canal. The vehicle was pushed downstream, water pouring in through the door seals. Carmichael tried to open the door, but the water pressure outside made it impossible. She tried the windows, but the electrical system had shorted out. She was trapped. By 6:21 p.m., the car was completely submerged. Carmichael was in an air pocket near the roof of the vehicle, but it was shrinking as water continued to pour in. She had perhaps 60 seconds of air remaining. She took a final deep breath as the water reached her face. Then she was underwater, holding her breath. The human body can survive without air for approximately 90 seconds before brain damage begins. Carmichael held her breath for as long as she could, but eventually, her body's reflex to breathe overpowered her will. She inhaled water. Her lungs filled. She drowned inside her car. At 6:35 p.m., the floodwaters receded enough for rescue teams to locate the vehicle. Divers pulled Carmichael's body from the car at 6:52 p.m. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The coroner's report listed cause of death as drowning due to flash flood vehicle submersion. Her death was preventable. If she had turned around instead of attempting to drive through the flooded road, she would have survived. The unattended child, Mia Rodriguez, 2 years old, was at a family pool party in San Diego, California on July 22, 2016. At 5:30 p.m., approximately 20 adults and 15 children were present. The pool area was crowded and noisy. Mia's mother, Sofia Rodriguez, was talking with relatives near the barbecue grill. approximately 30 feet from the pool. At 5:33 p.m., Mia wandered away from the group and approached the pool. No one noticed. She leaned over the edge and fell into the shallow end, which was 3.5 feet deep. Mia could not swim. She went under immediately. In a phenomenon known as drowning doesn't look like drowning, Mia did not scream or splash dramatically. Drowning is often silent. Her arms moved weakly at her sides, and her head bobbed just below the surface. To the casual observer, she might have appeared to be playing, but she was dying. Water filled her lungs. Her small body lacked the strength to push herself to the surface. Within 20 seconds, she lost consciousness. Her body sank to the bottom of the pool. At 5:37 p.m., 4 minutes after Mia had fallen in, a teenage cousin dove into the pool and saw her body at the bottom. He pulled her out and screamed for help. Sofia Rodriguez ran to her daughter and began CPR while someone called 911. Paramedics arrived at 5:44 p.m. and took over resuscitation efforts. Mia was transported to Radi Children's Hospital, where doctors worked for 45 minutes to revive her. She was pronounced dead at 6:41 p.m. The coroner's report listed cause of death as drowning due to lack of supervision. This death was entirely preventable. Despite 20 adults being present, no one had been designated to watch the children in the pool. This is called supervision dilution. When everyone assumes someone else is watching, no one actually is. These 5 drowning deaths share a common thread. They were all preventable, whether through better supervision, adherence to safety warnings, proper training, or simple awareness. These lives could have been saved. Water is unforgiving, and drowning is a silent, terrifying death. These stories serve as a reminder that prevention is always better than tragedy.